Welcome to the first video for topic 1.1 in AP Psychology. In this video, we will explore the concepts of nature versus nurture as they apply to psychological science. My name is Annette Nielsen, and I teach in the beautiful state of Utah at Woods Cross High School, just north of Salt Lake City. Before we get started, let's take a minute to reflect. In your experience, what do you think the major influences have been on your personality, your personal preferences, your intelligence and academic performance, your psychological health, your language development? Pause if you need to and take a moment and reflect, and then come back when you're ready. Psychological research is conducted to answer questions just like these and many others. The list could go on and on. One of the biggest issues in psychological research is trying to figure out the difference between nature and nurture as they influence all of these different traits and characteristics and behaviors. So let's look at the difference between the nature side and the nurture side of this big issue. By nature, we mean genetics, everything from within, biology from the inside out influencing who we are. For example, if we look at that last question that I asked you, your language acquisition, where does language come from? How did you develop the language that you speak or the languages that you speak? You might take on the perspective of somebody like Noam Chomsky. Noam Chomsky was famous for saying it's perfectly obvious that there is some genetic factor that distinguishes humans from other animals, and that is language specific. The theory that genetic components, whatever it turns out to be, is what is called universal grammar. For him, the fact that babies babble the speeches of all languages from birth and then eventually refine to that language that they speak within their household or the languages that they speak within their household, and then just know the grammar without being specifically taught is an indication that we have in our nature, biology from the inside out, the ability to acquire language and speak a variety of languages. So now let's take a look at the nurture side. The nurture side suggests that who we are is everything else. It's our environment, our learning, our conditioning, what we receive in rewards or punishments that shape us and interact to shape our behaviors. So language acquisition would be taught to us from the outside in through shaping and reinforcement and associative learning. A very famous nurturist or behaviorist is a man by the name of John B. Watson. He is famous for saying, "Give me a dozen healthy infants, well-formed, and my own specified world to bring them up in, and I'll guarantee to take that anyone at random and train him to be any type of specialist I might select. A doctor, lawyer, artist, merchant, chief, and yes, even beggar man thief, regardless of his talents, penchants, tendencies, abilities, vocations, and race of his ancestors. Regardless of biology, regardless of genetics, I can shape somebody from the outside in." That's nurture. So which is correct? Are we a product of our nature, our biology, our genetics, or are we a product of our nurture, our environment, our associations, our learning? Well, it's not one or the other. In fact, it's nature and nurture. Nature and nurture work together like two hands clapping to create the people that the characteristics and traits in us that we carry. Let's take a look at this interaction of nature and nurture at play. At conception, genetics determines many things. Genetics affect eye color and hair color, sex, temperament, but experience and environment work upon these characteristics. It's not genetics or environment, it's a team effort. They work together. Experience and the environment work upon those characteristics by influencing the choices that you make about your hair color as you grow, or the food choices and health habits that you have that might influence your body shape. Our norms and our families work alongside to influence those genetic factors that we are born with. Let's take a look at how we can actually see that influence of nurture upon nature. The research of epigenetics is designed to help us understand that interaction. One of the most famous studies that helps us to understand how the environment can alter our genetics are studies of rats and their licking behavior. Mother rats who lick their babies are caring and nurturing. The more licks, the better the mother, and the more love that they're passing on. What they've actually found is that the mothers pass on this behavior to their children. They pass on that licking behavior. So babies that have been licked by their mother lick their own babies later on. And the same thing applies to low licking mothers and their babies. Their babies become low licking adults who pass on that low licking trait to their babies. So to determine if that is genetic or environmental, as it seemed, they took the babies from low-licking mothers and switched them with the babies from high-licking mothers and watched to see what happened. As it turns out, both sets of babies took on the mother's behaviors. Then they took it a little bit further because it appeared to be pure nurture, right? The low-licking babies then became high-licking adults because they had been placed with a high-licking mother. Seems like it's environment. So they took a look at their brains and they took a look at their genetic information, and they found that there were actually now new differences in their genes. Care rats received from their mothers physically altered their genetic expression. It's so cool. That's epigenetics, the effect of nurture, the licking, on nature, genes. That's those two components of this issue working together. In a different study, it was discovered that rats raised in an enriched, stimulating environment showed enhanced long-term potentiation. What's long-term potentiation? That's the ability of our neurons to activate when we recall information that we have learned. What they found is that when you put a rat in an enriched, stimulating environment, it increased the chances that those neurons could fire when the rat needed to activate a memory from something that they had learned. What was most interesting is that when they followed the offspring of these rats that had been raised in an enriched environment, those offspring also had enhanced long-term potentiation, regardless of whether or not they had actually been exposed to an enriched environment. They were brand new babies. They hadn't even had a chance to have the exposure to create that LTP. So again, that's the influence of nurture and enriched environment on nature, working on that genetic material to create those enhanced neurons that were able to create that long-term potentiation. So what should we take away? First of all, nature and nurture do not work alone to influence human development. Instead, nature and nurture work together like two hands clapping. And epigenetic research helps us to see the amazing impact that nurture has on nature. Changes in our behaviors, our habits, and our environment can actually change our genetic expression, just like those rats. It's not one or the other. It's both working together. Thank you. I hope you'll take a look at the next video in this topic, where we'll talk about how twin studies also help us to understand the relationship between heredity and environment. Be well.